Okay. So I'm here with Sparkle Gail Higgins, and I wanted to ask you about your, I guess, relationship with Little Richard. I know you've got a connection for sure. What are your earliest memories of hearing old rock and roll radio? Where'd you grow up?
I grew up in New York on Long Island, and my uncles were all into, rock and roll and jazz and music. And so it was with me from an early age, following them. They were, a few of them were kind of bad boys. Well,
Like good fella bad boys? Is that what we're talking about in New York?
we're not sure.
Okay.
Yasha thinks that.
Did you get to see any of the originals, the pioneers back in the day? Like, what was your first concert you ever went to?
The first concert I ever went to was maybe the Clay Cole show, which was the same time as the Alan Freed
Uh
shows.
huh.
Um, I think that was my first concert.
So it was a variety of stars of the
Yeah,
day
they
type
were
thing.
in Brooklyn, and so everyone did it.
Uh huh.
For some reason, I don't know why Jackie Wilson is sticking out in my head
Uh,
because it was the first show he did after he got shot.
oh wow. Nice. So was it always just a casual love of music, or how soon did you get sort of involved in managing bands and that kind of thing?
Well, the first record I ever owned was Elvis because my mother was in love with Elvis,
Uh huh.
and that was the first record. And I did see Elvis live.
Wow.
And I always was sneaking out of the house to go to rock and roll shows.
Mm-hmm.
I saw the first time the Rolling Stones ever played in New York, and
Yes.
things like that. So
Mm-hmm.
I was always interested in music or fashion,
Mm-hmm.
and so I first started working in the fashion business. I was a buyer for big department stores and things like that. And
Mm-hmm.
then when I got fired for being a square peg in a round hole,
Uh-huh.
I said thank you very much and never looked back.
Uh-huh.
And that's when Lee Black Childers, I had a trip already booked to London. And so when I was there, he said, well, do you want to be the Heartbreakers road manager? And I said, sure, I don't have a job to go back to.
Uh-huh.
But I had already known all of them from New York. I lived with Johnny and my cousin Janice for, a while in New York. And so, I knew all the band and was very good friends with Johnny Thunders. So
Were they based out of London at that point?
when I went over, yes,
Mm-hmm.
they had just gone over to, it was right after the Anarchy tour.
Mm-hmm. And this is mid 70s? Is this what era is
This
that?
is 77.
Mm-hmm. So that's like I guess 5 years after the big Wembley rock and roll show that's so famous. How I guess were you aware of how huge those original rock and roll people were over in London when you went, or is that something you kind of discovered when you got there?
Um, my interest in music sort of went along with where I was at the moment it was happening. So when I was growing up, it was all the rock and roll shows in New York and Brooklyn and what my uncles were doing and the Dick Clark show and things like that. Then when I moved into the city, then it was all about, punk and CBGBs and
Mm-hmm.
Maxes and that whole era. Then when I moved to London, it was all about the punk era. And, I was friends with all of those bands before they were big. And
Mm-hmm.
so, it was about that particular era. And then when I moved back to the States with Lee and Smutty and Levi, then it was about the whole new rockabilly revival thing
Uh-huh.
in New York. So it's sort of, my thing has always been rock and roll. It hasn't sort of I don't like the Smiths. I don't like, those type of bands. It's all about the beat, the beat, the beat.
Yes.
So it sort of coincided with what was going on in the city that I was happened to be living in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, when we were over there, I guess 2 years ago, I think I told you about this, that we played in Camden Town, and we walked two doors down and into a rockabilly shop, and they knew you, and I can't remember the name of it now. But
uh, Probably Nick and Francois, maybe.
Things That
I don't know.
Swing, I can't remember the name of the place now. Oh no, I'm gonna have to look it up after. So
Sounds That Swing, the record store.
yeah, 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 yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Great. And it made me it's a strange thing to be an American over there and seeing how much Brits love American stuff. It's always kind of fun to see them so jealous that that we grew up, with that stuff surrounding us. You surely did.
I think they always delved into it a bit deeper and then did it a bit better.
Mm-hmm.
Like
Sure.
all the rockabilly clubs, the way they dressed, their whole interest in the history of it was always much deeper than any scene going on here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's kind of Europe in general. They take what we did and get really into it. So
Right.
we see that when we go over and play in Spain and places like that. So you were already doing sort of more retro clothing stuff in New York when you went back. Is that and what was the shop that you had in New York then?
When I moved back to New York, I really just started selling things that I had at markets. So I was really just selling off things that I had at markets, and then it just sort of grew from there. But I was always wearing vintage clothes and collecting things,
Mm-hmm.
and that's where the name came from. Because one, Jane Mansfield was my favorite actress. Two, Little Richard was one of my favorite performers.
Mm-hmm.
And a friend of mine always used to say to me, "The girl can't help it because I collected everything."
Ah, that's so perfect.
And that's how it started.
That's so great. When was it that you came to San Diego, and why?
Well, I had lived in New York. And then when I lived in New York, I said, I'll never, ever live anywhere else. And
Uh
then when I lived in London, I said, I'll never, ever live anywhere else.
huh. Yes.
And now I'm in San Diego, and I say the same thing.
All right.
But when my blood father lived in San Diego, and so when we would come on shopping trips to the States to bring back to London, San Diego would always be one of the stops we made.
Interesting.
And so when the housing market started to go a bit crazy in London, and we knew we didn't want to stay there forever, we were like, wow, for the price of this flat, we could have a house in San Diego with a pool and have nice weather all the time.
Tempting.
And yeah, and we knew people here, and so we just literally did it.
That's so great.
Just we came over, saw this house, put an offer in for it. It was a short sale, so we had no idea what that even meant.
Uh-huh.
But it took a while, but our flat in London sold in 3 weeks, and so we literally just packed our suitcases and our cat, and we're on a plane going, oh my God, what are we doing?
That's fun. Exciting. And
so that's how we ended up here.
so and how did you know Robert?
Well, I always, loved his performances and stuff. And when Yasha and I were in Amsterdam one year, we went to his show there, and we went to meet him. And I said, why haven't you ever played in London? And he went, I'd love to play in London. And I said, okay, I'm going to set it up.
Yes.
And that's how it started. And then he was in London a lot around Christmas time. So he started coming to Christmas dinners at our house there.
Mm-hmm.
And then when we moved here, suddenly he was in San Diego all the time at Christmas time.
Uh-huh.
And we've just been friends ever since we met him in Amsterdam.
Uh-huh. So I guess it was a year or two into you opening the shop that you guys talked about maybe doing something for your anniversary. Is that kind of how the band idea came?
No, the first when we opened. Oh, this music is weird. Okay, now it's off. When it opened, Elvez did the opening party with Pony Death Ride.
Right.
So for the 1 year anniversary party, I said to him, so at that show, Pat and Letty were there.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's the first time they had ever seen Robert.
Mm-hmm.
And so then they met. And then Robert was like, I'm going to do a band with these kids, like that. And so when our 1 year anniversary came up, I said, okay, do you want to play the 1 year anniversary? And that's when he said, oh, yeah, we could do the Little Richards and we could do 15 different versions of The Girl Can't Help It.
Uh-huh.
And that's how it started.
Oh, my gosh. And what did you think the first time you saw it?
Oh my God, I loved it. Of course,
Of course. How
the
flattering!
ska version, the rock and roll version.
I mean, how flattering that they did all
Now
that.
they're playing "Sunshine and Lollipops."
Oh, is that what's playing through your phone?
Yeah, that's what's playing on my end.
Oh my gosh! I thought you were saying, and they played a Sunshine and Lollipop version of The Girl Can't Help It. I'm like, well, I'd like to hear that. Oh my gosh. So, it started out just to play the opening, and then all of a sudden they were playing shows and made a record and toured. How was that?
And our store is on the front cover of their single.
Yeah, that was great. Robert mentioned that he liked having that connection, kind of like how the Sex Pistols had sex, and other bands from that era. It could be connected to the fashion store that dressed them. He liked that kind of nod.
Right. That's great.
Well, fun. Did you ever get to see Little Richard perform or have any random? Oh wow, where?
Yes, and I did. And now they're hosting the Golden Globes.
Oh my God.
The last show I saw was in London, actually, when he did a show. It was Little Richard, Jerry Lee Lewis, and Chuck Berry.
Jesus. The Holy Trinity.
Yeah. And that was the last time I saw him.
Oh, that's
I
so
did
great.
see him in New York as well, and I can't remember where. In the earlier days.
Uh-huh. Oh, that's great. Well, we're all talking about his very first record for the podcast. Is that something you would have owned, or were you like us? We just sort of knew his biggest hits, and then once we got involved with the band, we just started diving down and learning so much more about him than we ever knew.
I probably did own it at the time. Mm-hmm. Might even be in the garage in my pile of records.
Uh-huh. It's a good garage record. I can see that.
Yeah, no, it won't be because when I moved to London, then somebody stole all my records.
Oh, no.
Typical story.
Is that what happens in squats in London in 1977?
Well, no, that happened in New York.
Oh, jeez. Gosh.
Yeah.
So if you had to pick a favorite of his, is that something you could do?
Yeah. Hi Ann.
Hi Ann.
The Ann one.
Oh, Miss Ann.
Yeah.
Oh, it's such a good one.
I love that song. And it always makes, and whenever I hear it, even when it comes on in the store, it makes me think of Diana Death.
Of course. It's funny how we all ended up feeling like these were our songs, the ones that we sang. So yeah, when I heard it, I immediately thought of her and us dancing behind her. So fun. So I have you to thank, because if it wasn't for you, I wouldn't have got to go travel Europe with them for this fun idea. So thank you very much, and thanks for talking to us.
Okay.
All right.
Good.
That'll do.
Okay.